She also had a problem with speech. Open air dried out her vocal cords quickly and caused her speech to be garbled. She was working on them so that they would hold moisture longer, but they could still stop functioning properly mid-sentence. At this point, it was still best for her to simply not speak. She did feel she was close to getting it right, though. To pass this challenge, her main barrier was becoming efficient enough with her camouflage while awake that she could maintain it indefinitely. She also needed to be able to keep focus on it despite any stimuli that would disrupt it. Obbs would intentionally do things to test this by having her answer questions, eat, make her laugh, and a few times scare her. At this point, she was able to maintain her human appearance for 3 days before she became so fatigued that she would start to slip up. And it was always her hair that would give her away. It was finally light enough for her to enter the water. The things that roamed at night would be gone or sleepy, and the others would be groggy and waking up. As she walked into the water, she slightly expanded the webbing in between her fingers and toes, the opposite of what she did for her human form. She shivered as her skin shimmered and effortlessly adapted to her environment. Wow, shivered and shimmered are kind of hard to say back to back. In the last year, she had been allowed to roam the waters around the island. She had become so familiar and practiced with the seascape nearby that even without focusing, she was nearly invisible. That would change as she moved further afield. The more unfamiliar the terrain, the more focus it required. She did keep her eyes peeled for any signs of dangerous creatures, but generally the area around Obbs Island was fairly safe, and Naga only passed near when they traveled to the tidal womb on a nearby island. Her attention to detail that she honed while perfecting her own camouflage had given her enhanced perception, which, combined with her knowledge of the area, easily allowed her to notice anything amiss. As she descended downward among the coral, she quickly noticed an oval shadow above her, just shy of the surface. A sea turtle, she thought. She moved closer to get a better look. It was a young adult. While some 10 feet long, it was small compared to many creatures in the open waters around here. It was a sign that the migration of the Coriacea would start soon. The small migratory creatures always moved first because once the Coriacea started to move and the currents changed, it became too hard for small creatures to make the journey. Maybe this year, I'll get to see a Coriacea up close. While she had earned the privilege to enter the water around this time last year, she hadn't been able to go far and none of them came close enough. Obbs' island was a bit out of the way for them on their path to their nesting grounds on the shelf. Obbs had said that if she expanded her area of familiarity past the third island, she might be able to catch sight of one this year. As she approached the turtle, she found herself humming quietly, and she allowed her passive camouflage to drop partially off. The turtle shifted in her direction and she outstretched her hand. She hadn't met this turtle before, so she avoided the neck and started giving him some gentle scritches on his shell. It closed its eyes and started to wiggle contentedly in place. She was a little disappointed she didn't have any food to give it as she had just started her foraging. Then her peripheral vision caught some movement gliding closer. A sluggish shark, likely still awake because it hadn't found anything to eat yet. It had spotted the turtle and was approaching. As it came closer, Ina increased the volume of her pleasant humming and directed it at the shark. At first, it circled at a distance, but then picked up speed, heading straight for the turtle. At around 20 feet away, it seemed to lose focus, slowed down, and shifted its direction slightly towards Ina. The turtle shifted its eyes towards the shark, and Ina felt the turtle's slow heart rate increase. "Don't worry, it's okay," she thought as she gave it some calming neck scritches. The shark continued to slow, almost coming to a stop right in front of Ina. Its mouth was slack and open, revealing rows of sharpened teeth, but its eyes were glazed over and unfocused. She could have issued a discordant tone and sent the shark fleeing far away, but she was aware of how loud that would be, and sound carried far underwater. Instead, she quieted her humming but leaned close to the shark's ear holes. Focusing on her humming, she placed a hand on the shark's rubbery feeling side and gave it a few pats. There, there. You aren't really that hungry, are you? I bet there's a lot of fish in that direction. But you better go quickly before they run away. Focusing on the idea, Ina gave the shark one last pat and then gently pushed in the direction she had been thinking of. It quickly swiped its tail and was off, gliding quickly through the water and then out of sight. By the time it came to its senses, it would have forgotten all about the turtle. Good riddance. Ina really didn't like sharks. They had scared her when she was younger, before she realized that even without her camouflage, they wouldn't attack Naga unless desperate for food. They just didn't really have a purpose except to kill, and they annoyed her when they went after the passive creatures that she liked to befriend. Fortunately, while she didn't use it often, she had inherited from her mother a knack for using tone to affect emotions. Or at least, Ina thought that she had. She had never met her. That allowed her to subtly influence creatures' emotions with her voice. Unfortunately, due to her need to avoid discovery on her journeys, she didn't get to practice it much. This had left her a level 3 siren. The turtle had quickly calmed. She stopped her humming, gave it some final scritches, and then a final pat. Her skin shifted back to camouflage, and she started to continue swimming towards the second island. As she looked back, she could tell the turtle was a bit confused as it looked around, maybe wondering where its new friend had gone. Eventually, it started to continue onward on its own journey. Sorry I couldn't stay longer, she thought, but I only have a few more days of practice before the Coriacea are here. Then she felt an odd vibration subtly in the water around her as a distant buzzing picked up. The buzzing grew steadily louder and the tone started shifting down the scale from high to low pitch. What the? She scanned all around her, and while schools of fish darted away and coral retracted, she could see nothing else obvious. It continued to grow louder, and she focused on her camouflage, blending into a rocky section of the sea floor. The sound became so loud she started to move her hands to her ears, and then suddenly there was a loud crash and an obscuring eruption of bubbles as something huge impacted the surface 100 feet in front of her. It looked like a big, smooth, rocky tube with wings. Some kind of flying creature? The side closest to her started to pitch down and slowly sink. It wasn't moving. Is it dead? Ina was a little scared, but started to almost quiver with excitement. This was something new. She had already saw one shark heading over to check it out. She had to restrain herself from immediately swimming over, and instead carefully started to make her way towards it. And then she saw the creatures coming out of the thing. As she approached, she saw one swim out the hole closest to her. It paused, looked around, then made a beeline swim for a nearby island. Her skin flickered with surprise. A human! Ina was not a spy, but she did enjoy observing things, especially when they were unaware of her, especially when she could learn or see something she wasn't supposed to. Humans were never seen in the Abyssal Sea, other than Obs, who didn't really count. What is that thing they were inside of? Had it fallen out of the sky? Where did they come from? Ina had so many questions. She knew humans had ships, but the edge was so far inside Naga territory they would be attacked and killed long before penetrating this deep. I wonder how long before they show up to investigate. If they heard that impact all the way down in the lightless reef. That was one of the many reasons Ina had paused her approach. Other Naga could show up any minute, and she could not be seen by them. Also, humans were incredibly dangerous. It was a race of violent murderers. Every year they invaded the shelf and killed thousands of Naga during the emergence. They would have had to be extremely powerful to get this far. And yet, Ina watched as some of the humans struggled to swim, splashing around on the surface of the water, making a lot of noise but barely moving. She watched as a strange orange boat popped into existence on the far end of the plane from her, and some of the humans started pulling themselves onto it. Where did that come from? She winced as the shark started to close in. She thought about how she had saved the turtle, but this was different. They are humans, she thought. She watched as one very large human swum out from the plane carrying a second, smaller one. He actually seemed like he was the best swimmer of the bunch as he quickly reached the life raft and handed up his passenger. There seemed to be some problem with the raft because she saw him kick his legs as though to climb onto it, but then he fell back into the water. Maybe he's too weak to get on? Then she watched as he started to make a break for the island, and one of the now many sharks in the area took notice. It was actually going to swim right past her on its way after him. Without meaning to, she felt herself starting to hum and only noticed when the shark started to veer off towards her. She immediately stopped. The other Naga could show up any moment, and they would definitely notice her if she was making any noise. Not worth it for a human. But she couldn't look away. The human had just about made it to the island when the shark went back after him. She felt herself mentally urging the human forward despite herself, but the big man wasn't fast enough. The shark bit into his leg and had just started to drag him down when she saw him punch the shark. To her surprise, the shark let go, allowing the human to scramble out of the water, a cloud of blood expanding behind him in the water. Maybe he'll survive. And then she thought about the Gants that lived there. She turned back to look at the plane. A dozen sharks were now meandering through the area, but humans had stopped emerging from the thing. She scanned the ocean and saw no signs of the Naga. Maybe they hadn't heard it. Her curiosity got the best of her and she carefully approached the plane. Who knows what could be inside there? She was sure there had to be at least a few things that were worthy of her collection. Her skin quivered with excitement. She found an opening in the side and looked in. Inside were long rows of seats, and she could tell from the jagged edges at the front and back, as well as the scorch marks, that it was damaged badly. Had it been in some kind of battle? Something glinted in the orange light, drawing her to a dead human still seated. The belt buckle it wore was reflecting some of the light from the surface. She liked shiny things, and if he was dead, it wasn't technically stealing, right? Besides, it's a human. She swam over and reached out to touch the object. It felt smooth and cold, and she knew she wanted it. She started to fidget with it, trying to get the buckle undone. And then suddenly, the creature was awake and screaming in her face. Ina panicked and scrambled backwards to take cover behind another seat. She immediately tried to calm her 3 fast-beating hearts and focused on her camouflage. She slowly peeked with one eye and then the other over the back of the chair. The human had stopped screaming and warily looked in her direction and then out the opening as a large shark swam by. She saw his eyes go wide. He held out his palms towards her briefly and then moved to the opening. How long can humans hold their breath for? It wasn't supposed to be very long. The human now in the opening had his medium-length brown hair illuminated by the orange light filtering down from the surface. His hair, Ina thought. She found herself captivated as it flowed out from his scalp, each strand moving individually, but also making up wavy patterns as it rippled in the water. She was almost hypnotized at first, and then almost unconsciously started taking notes on how it looked, how it moved. Wasn't even close. There are so many improvements I can make. I wonder what it feels like. What does it look like outside of the water? How does it move in the wind? The human stayed at the opening for a few seconds, and then something grabbed his attention, and he seemed to steel himself and then tried to kick off. Then his pants got caught on a jagged edge. Ina noticed only when his hair was jolted from the whiplash. The human struggled to free himself, but just kept trying repeatedly to pull in a way that clearly wasn't going to free his leg. And then she saw the blood starting to mist out into the water. Ina thought for a moment and made a decision. She knew what she was going to steal from the plane. Her skin again quivered with excitement. She was going to steal